All right. I have witnessed people go through intense emotional release as a result of doing certain body centered practices, such as breath work. I think the idea is that the body stores certain emotions, memories, or trauma. I have two questions about this. One, how does that work? What is it that occurs during such processes? And two, does this not contradict the MBT idea that the avatar is virtual and doesn't have fundamental existence? Why and how would a virtual avatar store certain emotions, memories, or trauma? According to MBT, even the brain does not actually store or process anything. It doesn't exist beyond being merely ones and zeros on a hard drive.
Mhm.
So, how do we reconcile this?
This is a very similar question to the first question. The two of them are cousins, at least, if not siblings. The body does not store information, or I guess we just call it information. It doesn't store those sorts of things. That's us attempting to make things that are basically happen in consciousness more physical so we can relate to them. Okay, so it's metaphorical. If we want to think of something, we tend to make it something physical. And if it's about us, we make it part of our body. So I'll have these lumps in the back of my neck, in the back of my shoulders, and I go to a masseuse will work on those lumps with their thumbs, and I say, oh, you have a lot of stress here. You have these knots in your muscles. Okay. Now, how does that happen? How do the muscles get knotted because of my stress? Well, the connection between the body, this body is a virtual body. It's rendered. It's a rendered body. It's computed. Now, the player of this virtual body is a free will awareness unit. It's a piece of consciousness. Okay. You've heard me say the mind leads, the body follows. Okay. So if the mind is full of stress, one of the ways it expresses that stress in the physical reality is by clumpy muscles up around my upper shoulders. That's the way it expresses that stress.
Right.
It's an expression of the consciousness. When you have somebody doing breathing or doing something else, staring at a mandala or a candle flame or something, and suddenly they start crying or doing other kinds of things, it's not that the mandala or the candle flame or the breath work or all the rest of it makes them cry. It's that they have a lot of pent-up stuff, feelings in that conscious. That free will awareness unit has a lot of pent-up feelings, a lot of stress, you might say. Let's put the stress in consciousness. So the free will awareness unit is confused about things. It has things that seem to contradict each other, and it has fears, and it doesn't know how to do this. It needs to go here, but it's afraid to go here, and that creates stress. Well, the body needs to reflect that stress. Otherwise, the consciousness playing the body would be totally removed from the body. The body would always be just the way it was. It would never change. It would always be the same.
Right.
But we have to connect the body to the mind in the way that as the consciousness is having these issues, the mind leads, the body follows. The body then represents these issues in different ways. So it will represent stress as knots in the back of my upper shoulders, my back. I'll get knots in them. So do a lot of people. That's just a kind of a common way to do stress. Now, what we say is, oh, my stress, I'm carrying all this stress in my muscles. My muscles have the stress. Well, that's because we think of everything physically. even those things that are mental, we have a physical connection. If you're mental and you're feeling fearful, you'll probably tense, and your body will start secreting various kind of hormones and things that have to do with being fearful. You know, the flight or fight or freeze, that comes because of hormones get secreted. Well, why is that? Because the consciousness is frightened. The body responds to that in certain ways. I think many people who take things like Prozac, there's 20 different brand names now. That Prozac was the first one to come out, so I just used that. A lot of that is the fact that they were, in their consciousness, they were unhappy, they were stressed, they were fearful, they were having problems. And the way the body expresses that is it reduces the amount of serotonin in the central nervous system. And the way that medicine combats that is they give you pills that will help raise the level of that serotonin. But you see, the root of that problem is in consciousness. But the rule set says you give somebody a pill that increases their serotonin, then all right, now the body feels better. That's all rule set stuff. But the mind leads, the body follows. If you are constantly unhappy, negative, complaining, upset, you know, if you're one of those people that just are constantly wallowing in the negative, then your lifespan is probably cut short by 20 years. You might easily live into your 90s, but you die at 65 because you've had so much stress in your life. So we know the mind affects the body dramatically. And the only way the body affects the mind is it puts constraints on the mind. You get hit in the head, you have brain damage, now you can't do certain things you used to do. So now you constrain the consciousness to work with an avatar that has diminished capabilities because the body won't function. So that's the rule set. The consciousness can only do what the rule set allows. So you have an accident and you lose a leg, then the consciousness has to work with an avatar with one leg. You know? So that's the way the body influences the consciousness, by producing constraints on what the conscious can do or not do. So you happen to be born with gifts like maybe long fingers. Well, now that consciousness can have an easier time playing the piano or whatever else, long finger, being a basketball player, whatever, if it also has height, whatever long fingers makes it easier to do things. Or being taller or being shorter. You know, there's advantages and disadvantages to kind of everything. So that limits what the consciousness can do with that avatar. So, but the things that all the memory, all the processing of information, all of the choices come from the consciousness. So it's the consciousness that has the fear. It's the consciousness that is upset. It's the consciousness that's stressed. And it expresses that in the body. Otherwise, there wouldn't be this feedback between them. You know, if the body just was a little puppet that got played, but it never could change or anything, then it wouldn't really be a great avatar. It needs to be a great avatar so that the consciousness, various issues that the consciousness is having, somehow show as physical issues in this body. Now, how does that happen? Well, the body is computed. So if you have a consciousness with a lot of stress, then the body is computed with knots in the shoulder muscles because it's mirroring that. That's why the conscious leads, the body follows. The body is just rendered, but it's rendered according to the consciousness. Now, it could have been that the system could have said, well, if somebody's stressed, we'll put knots in their feet or knots in their arm muscles. But for some reason, it decided that knots in their upper back and neck would be better. So exactly why it's there, I don't know. The system does that on its own. But there needs to be some feedback. There needs to be some relationship between what the consciousness is feeling and what gets rendered. And that tends to be consistent so that some people get knots in their feet, other people get knots in their shoulders, other people get knots in their legs. That would be kind of confusing. It wouldn't be as obvious what was going on and what the relationships were. So consistency is important too.
So I've seen this in myself and others, where as a result of doing spiritual work or inner psychological work, that the results of that can manifest in the body as like maybe a sense of relief or a sense of like tension disappearing. So that's a clear example of how a change in consciousness gets reflected as a change in the body. However, the thing where it confuses me a bit is when people do practices that are mostly body centered. For example, I mentioned breath work. And with breath work, someone basically lies down and breathes very intensely for a long period of time. And then with that physical practice, things start to happen in the consciousness, it seems. It seems like, they may start crying, or they may start, well, I don't know, I guess like just intense emotional release is what often happens. So that's a bit harder for me to understand, because now we're starting out with a practice that's fundamentally physical, and the consciousness gets affected. So how would you explain that?
The thing that's physical also has a consciousness analog to it. When you're lying down and doing that breathing, you're not typing on your computer. You're not in the office working. You're not at home having an argument with your children. You're not doing anything. You're by yourself. You're maybe with other people doing the same thing. It's quiet. It tends to be peaceful. They've got this lovely little music going on in the background that's very nice. You're in a different kind of a space.
Yes.
And you are being encouraged to meditate, whether it's called meditation or not. You tend to relax your mind, relax your muscles, open just let your attention be only on your breathing. Don't think about anything else. Just be aware of your breathing. Well, this is a meditation technique.
Right.
You just focus on your breathing. What that does is takes your mind off all the other physical inputs you have and takes them into one physical input that is automatic. So you don't have to control it. It's not under your intellectual control. You just breathe. Oh, you can put it under your intellectual control, but that's not what's going on here. You just breathe. So now your awareness, that's just a meditation technique. So these people who are doing these things, this breath work or whatever else, they're really putting themselves into a meditation state. They're getting relaxed, they're connecting. And what that does, it kind of frees the consciousness to interact with itself, because it's not busy doing, avatar things.
Right.
Now the consciousness is kind of freed up to interact within itself. Well, that's kind of special. All kinds of things happen. It thinks about things. And if it does this routinely, let's say this is its 20th time it's tried to do this. The first time it tried to do it, nothing happened. The second time, not much happened. The 20th or 50th time that it does this, things start to happen. And the reason they start to happen is because the person now relaxes into it. They've let their intellect go. Their intellect was busy at first. Am I doing it right? Is this the right thing? Am I breathing the right way? And the instructor comes over and tells you to stop arching your back. You need to relax. And, all these things happen. And eventually you get used to it. So as you get used to it, you stop processing all the other stuff. You learn to just let go. And then the mind is there. And suddenly part of your consciousness goes to, the relationship you had with your parents. or the trouble you're having in life with people or something like that. And now you're all consciousness, really. Your consciousness reflecting on itself.
Right.
And things happen. You either get suddenly awashed in the sadness of something, and maybe you cry, or maybe you get suddenly an idea of, oh, it's not me at all. I just make everything about me. Oh, and that may make you cry too, because it's fun. Finally, you get a solution. You get some understanding about what's going on. So crying or shouting or doing anything, and it becomes some kind of high point, some kind of release in your tension, because you've had all this stuff wadded up, got knots all over your back, and suddenly you get some understanding or some release or some idea of making peace with these issues you have. And yeah, and it works really, really well. Well, what they're doing is they're putting you in a meditation state, and hardly anybody just goes in there and the very first time they lie down and wow, everything happens, because most of us are so uptight and so much locked into our intellect that it takes us to our 50th time or our 20th time before we can just let it all go. That's just us learning how to meditate, us learning how to let go. And then you're a piece of consciousness working on itself, thinking about itself, thinking about big pictures. And suddenly you see yourself in a different perspective. Now you see yourself from a bigger picture. Oh, there I am. I'm arguing with my children. Oh, there I am. I'm arguing with my wife. Oh, there I am. I'm arguing with my coworkers. Oh, there I am. I'm arguing with my boss. Jesus, I argue a lot. I don't seem to be happy with anything unless it's the way I want it. It's all about me, and I'm imposing what I want on everybody else, and I get angry when I don't get it. Oh, and then you cry, and then you feel better. And then about 9 times out of 10, in 2 weeks, you go right back to doing what you were doing before. You start arguing with everybody again. And then you come back and you do it. And then that's just learning. Learning is slow, and it takes a lot of repetition. And that's what's going on there. So that's the point of meditation. You become just consciousness. Now, what a lot of people do then is kind of pretend themselves into other physical activity because that's what they're used to doing. I'm used to doing stuff. So when I meditate, what am I going to do? I will fight evil. So then you grab your great sword of truth and go out and fight evil. And that's what you do for a while, because that's kind of an action that you feel comfortable with. And you're doing something good for the world. You're getting rid of evil. Well, all that's in your mind. And that's usually a young male takes that route. He fights evil for a while. And then he outgrows that and he does other things. And I'm not sure what the women do first. You'll have to ask some women and see what they do first in their meditations. See where the kind of imagery they get into. But in any case, young males tend to get in because that's one of their fundamental roles in life. They're a protector.
Right.
They're the bodyguard. They're the soldier. They're the protector. So that's just a natural role for them to get into, and they find evil and run it through with their sword of truth. So that's typical. Now, not all young males do that, but it's common that kind of thing happens, that males get into more of a fighting thing because that's part of what they're all about. And I'm sure females have their own kind of imagery that they attach to. That's what meditation is all about, is letting the consciousness, connect with itself, deal with its own issues, deal with its own problems, find itself, find the bigger picture.
No, that explanation makes complete sense. And now that I think about it, because I have some friends who use breath work, and whenever they had their breakthroughs, they were always pushing through some sort of fear in themselves, They had to like, some part of them had to let go, which was a scary thing to do. It required courage. And after that, after they managed to do that, that's when the emotional release came. So that points to it being an exercise in consciousness more than just a physical exercise. So, yeah, that makes complete sense. Thank you for clarifying that. That was fantastic.
Love is the answer. If there's one way to discover this truth that Tom Campbell, physicist and consciousness expert, has concluded, it is through your own experience. Give yourself the gift of experiencing yourself. After all, Tom has stated so many times that if it's not your experience, it's not your truth. So learn to experience with Tom's Exploring Consciousness and Everything Paranormal program and unlock those natural abilities for yourself. Discover why love is the answer. Binaural beats included to assist you. Details are in the description below. Thank you.
I and MBT Events hope you like this video. If you do, then you should consider being a Patreon member, because Patreon members get early access to our special content. You will also be able to get your questions answered by me in special Q&A sessions, and most importantly, your contribution as a patron member will enable us to produce the content that you're looking for. So thank you.